The sun always rose differently over Ururoko village whenever Oduro the mighty walked its red clay paths. Some said the sky brightened at the sight of him. Others believed even the wind bowed slightly, weaving through the tall palm trees as though greeting an old friend. But everyone agreed on one thing: there had never been a warrior like him. Oduro was a giant of a man, broad-shouldered, towering, and built like a tree carved by the gods. Yet for all his strength, his voice was warm, his smile gentle, and his footsteps soft. Children ran to him without fear. Elders blessed him wherever he passed. Women praised his kindness more than his muscles. And men, warriors from every corner of the land, spoke of him with both admiration and awe. He was undefeated. Not in friendly matches, not in competitions, not in battles against raiders who once threatened Ururoko's peace. His spear had never fallen. His shield had never cracked. His spirit had never wavered. He won so many village tournaments that the king once joked, "If we carve all your victories into our palace walls, Oduro, we will run out of stones before we run out of your achievements." But even with fame resting easily on his shoulders, Oduro carried himself with the humility of a common farmer. He greeted the poor first. He protected the weak without expecting praise. He shared his rewards with widows, travelers, and hungry children. When approached with admiration, he always said the same words: "Strength is nothing if it does not lift others." This was why Ururoko loved him. This was why neighboring villages feared him. This was why the king trusted him more than any other warrior. And as the seasons passed, his legacy grew, until even his shadow felt like a blessing across the land. But no legacy, however mighty, can outlast time. One dry season morning, when the harmattan wind covered the earth with pale dust, Oduro did not rise from his mat. His great chest, once full of thunderous life, lay silent. His spear stood in the corner of his home, like a tree without roots. His shield rested on the wall, reflecting a room emptied of breath and laughter. Oduro the mighty was gone. The king wept like a father who had lost a son. Warriors lowered their heads. The village fell into a grief so deep that the drums refused to sound for 7 days. Rumors spread through neighboring lands that Ururoko had lost its lion, its guardian, its greatest son. And at his burial, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, the villagers crowded around his grave. Men who had once trembled before him now cried openly. Children clung to their mothers, sensing they had lost someone whose presence had made them braver. Even the wind that evening was still, too respectful to disturb the moment. Among the mourners stood Oduro's only child, Bariga. Tall, strong, fearsome in size, and carrying the same warrior's blood that had pumped through his father's veins. Many believed he would continue the mighty legacy. Others whispered that the shadow Oduro left behind might be too large for any man to stand in. But for now, the people wept for their hero. For now, the world felt heavier. For now, the legend of Oduro the mighty rested in silence, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The drums of mourning had barely faded when a new sound rose over Ururoko, a heavy, thunderous pounding that made the ground tremble. It was the walk of Bariga Oduro, the only son of the mighty Oduro, and the man who would inherit everything his father had built. Bariga was a giant in every sense of the word. His shoulders were as broad as a barn door, his arms thick like the trunks of Iroko trees, and his voice rolled like distant thunder. From the day he was born, the village believed Oduro's spirit lived in him. And when his father died, that belief became law. King Amenka, wearing a face carved by grief, called the village to the square. The elders formed a circle. The drums began their slow, ancestral hum. And in that sacred moment, the staff of Oduro, the staff carried into every battle, the staff that had never touched defeat, was placed into Bariga's hand. At first, the people cheered. At first, hope glowed bright. They wanted so desperately to believe a great man's son would inherit his greatness. But greatness does not pass through blood. Sometimes it must be earned. And Bariga had earned nothing. The change begins. Bariga accepted the staff with a smirk rather than reverence. His eyes darted over the crowd not with love, but with a hunger for power. From that same day, a shift rolled through Ururoko like a cold wind. Where Oduro had walked humbly, Bariga walked heavily. Where Oduro had spoken softly, Bariga barked orders. Where Oduro had protected, Bariga conquered. People whispered that the staff felt heavier in his hands, as if the ancestors themselves resisted him. But Bariga did not notice. Bariga did not care. A warrior's talent, twisted. To give him his due, Bariga was strong, frighteningly strong. He trained like a beast unleashed, roaring through the training grounds, snapping wooden spears like twigs, lifting stones no other warrior could move. In competitions across neighboring villages, he won. In wrestling matches, he crushed opponents. In hunting trials, he claimed the largest kills. Glory after glory stacked around his name, and each victory only fed the monstrous pride swelling inside him. Soon he began calling himself Bariga the Unbreakable. A title he gave himself, never a good sign. Power without restraint. But with power came cruelty. At first it was small things. A farmer would find Bariga drinking palm wine in his compound, eating his yams, claiming, "Your land should honor me." A young man would find Bariga riding his best goat, just to prove he could. A widow would discover her harvest missing because Bariga said he needed it for training. Anyone who dared protest earned a glare that froze their blood. His father's loyal warriors, men who still mourned mighty Oduro, now backed Bariga blindly, out of duty or fear. People began avoiding the paths he walked. Children hid when they heard his footsteps. Women prayed their husbands never crossed him. Homes fell silent when he passed. The gentle respect Oduro built over a lifetime vanished in weeks, replaced by trembling dread. Complaint without justice. Finally, the village cracked under the weight of his tyranny. A group of elders, led by Elder Nwandi, approached King Amenka himself. "Your Majesty," they pleaded, "Bariga dishonors his father's name. He oppresses us. He takes what he desires. If this continues, the village will break." They also went to Chief Madogo, the man who once advised Oduro and helped raise Bariga as a boy. But both leaders offered the same weary, helpless answer. "He wins battles for us. He brings trophies home. He strengthens our village's reputation. For now, let us endure him." It was the blind loyalty to his father's legacy and the fear of losing their champion that allowed Bariga's darkness to grow unchecked. A name wrapped in fear. By the end of that year, people spoke his name in whispers. Bariga, Bariga, Bariga. A name that once promised the return of greatness now became the drumbeat of fear. He walked with Oduro's staff, but none of Oduro's heart. And though he did not know it yet, the shadow of arrogance he cast over Ururoko would soon draw a storm that even he could not escape. The harmattan wind had just begun to loosen its grip on the village of Ururoko when something unusual happened, something that would change the balance of power in ways no one expected. The villagers noticed him first at dawn. A lone man walked into Ururoko with nothing but a small sack on his shoulder and a carved wooden staff in his hand. He was tall, giant tall. His skin held the warmth of distant deserts, and his eyes carried a calm that felt older than the land. Yet he wore no badge of honor, no warrior beads, no traveler's emblem. He simply walked with quiet dignity. The stranger introduces himself. When he reached the village square, the elders approached cautiously. "Stranger, what name do you bear?" Elder Nwada asked, leaning on his staff. The giant bowed gently, a gesture that surprised everyone. "My name is Tarek," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "I seek only a place to rest my feet and work for my food." There was no boast in his tone. No arrogance. Just calm certainty. The villagers exchanged glances. A man of his size and stature could easily demand shelter or force his way in. Yet he asked politely. That alone earned their respect. Tarek's quiet power. Within days, rumors spread like wildfire. Tarek helped the potters carry heavy clay stones alone. He assisted farmers lifting uprooted logs that needed 5 men. He repaired a broken canoe at the river without being asked. And every time someone tried to thank him, he simply smiled and said, "Strength means nothing if it serves only the self." This shocked the villagers. For many seasons, they had endured Bariga's pride and cruelty. They had forgotten what true humility and strength looked like until Tarek arrived. His first competition. When the village hosted its monthly wrestling contest, Tarek stood among the spectators. He had no intention to participate, but the villagers urged him, "Show us your skill. Let's see if you carry your strength only in your size." "Enter the arena, stranger." With a hesitant smile, he agreed. The moment he stepped into the sandy ring, even the birds in the trees fell silent. His opponent, a fierce champion named Doga, charged at him with everything he had. Tarek simply sidestepped. Doga fell face-first into the sand. The crowd gasped. In 3 moves, Tarek lifted the man and placed him gently outside the ring, as though carrying a sleeping child. No violence. No showmanship. Just precise, controlled strength. The people erupted in cheers. "He fights like Oduro." "No, he fights like someone greater." "This man is special." The shadow of admiration. Word spread fast. Tarek began winning every competition: wrestling, spear throwing, staff fighting, endurance races. But unlike Bariga, he did not celebrate, boast, or walk around expecting honor. He bowed to every opponent he defeated. He treated every villager, young or old, with respect. He ate with the commoners, not the wealthy. The villagers felt something they hadn't felt since mighty Oduro walked the earth. Admiration mixed with hope. Whispers of a new champion. It did not take long before the talk reached King Amenka's palace. "Your Majesty," the messengers said, "a new giant has risen in Ururoko. His name is Tarek. He fights like a river spirit and behaves like a noble." The king raised a brow. Chief Madogo stroked his beard thoughtfully. "And Bariga?" Bariga heard the whispers too, and his heart tightened like a clenched fist. A new giant had come. A giant the people loved. A giant who reminded them of his father more than he ever could. The first time Bariga heard Tarek's name, it was spoken in a tone he had not heard in many years. A tone of admiration. A tone once reserved only for his father and for him. But now the whispers in Ururoko carried a new rhythm. A new favorite. A new giant. And Bariga felt something he had not felt since he first carried his father's staff of honor. Jealousy. The growing shadow. Tarek had been in the village for only a few moons, yet his presence had already become a force. Not because he bragged. Not because he demanded. But because he earned admiration with a quiet strength that carried the scent of humility. The same humility Oduro the Mighty once carried. Where Bariga walked, fear followed. Where Tarek walked, hope followed. The contrast irritated Bariga like sand beneath his sandals. He watched from afar as Tarek greeted elders with a bow, helped young boys practice spear stances, and offered to carry baskets for aging mothers. Villagers smiled when Tarek passed, smiles Bariga felt belonged to him. For the first time in many seasons, Bariga's dominance felt challenged. Comparison. The wound of a proud man. Bariga overheard them in markets, in paths, in gatherings. "See how calm he is, like Oduro once was." Tarek fights with grace. Not just power. Oduro's spirit lives in him more than in Bariga. If there's anyone who can restore our village's honor, it is Tarek. Each word was a dagger twisting slowly into his pride. He smashed pots in his compound. He shouted at his servants. He even struck a stable boy who simply asked if he wanted his horse prepared. Bariga hated Tarek, not because Tarek wronged him, but because Tarek reminded the village of what Bariga could never become. Rivalry begins. One afternoon, Bariga stood behind the council hall and watched Tarek practice with the younger warriors. Tarek's movements were precise, light yet powerful, disciplined yet fluid. Every motion carried purpose. Bariga stepped forward and slammed his spear into the ground, trying to intimidate. The youths fell silent. Tarek only turned, bowed lightly, and said, "Warrior Bariga, it is an honor. Respect. Genuine, unforced respect." But Bariga did not feel honored. He felt mocked. "You fight well," Bariga grunted. "But let it not confuse you. This is my village. You are only a visitor." Tarek nodded calmly. "I am only here to serve, not to compete with anyone." But Bariga heard the villagers whisper, "He speaks like Oduro. Yes, he sounds like a true giant." And Bariga walked away, with his jaw clenched and fire burning behind his eyes. A royal decision. Word of Tarek's victories reached King Amenka. At first, the king dismissed the stories. He had heard many exaggerations in his life. But when Tarek defeated 3 trained warriors in a single match at the village square, the king took notice. He invited Tarek to the palace. Chief Madogo was present. Bariga, standing by the throne, scowled as Tarek entered. The king studied the newcomer's build, his calm aura, his respectful bow. "You are strong," the king said, "but strength without discipline is useless." Tarek kneeled. "My king, strength is nothing if not used to protect." Chief Madogo's eyebrows lifted. Bariga almost growled. The king leaned forward. "The intervillage tournament is 2 weeks away. Our village must not be shamed. I choose you, Tarek, to represent Ururoko." The hall fell silent. Bariga felt his blood erupt like a boiling storm inside him. Tarek bowed again. "I will give my best, my king." But Bariga's fists tightened. His pride could not accept that another giant, an outsider, had been chosen alongside him. A new fire ignited in his heart. Not the fire of honor, not the fire of strength, but the fire of hatred born from fear. And in the shadows of his mind, rivalry took root. A rivalry that would soon grow into something far darker. The drums of Ururoko began to thunder long before the sun rose. Every villager woke with the same mixture of excitement and fear because today, the warriors of many lands would gather to fight in a great tournament, the battle that determined which village carried honor for the next decade. In every hut, fighters stretched, sharpened blades, rubbed oils into their skin, and whispered prayers to their ancestors. But in one hut, the one belonging to Bariga Oduro, the son of the greatest warrior the land had ever known, the story was different. Bariga's arrogance. Bariga woke late, stretching lazily as if the day belonged to him alone. He didn't train. He didn't meditate. He didn't even touch the spear that had once belonged to Oduro, the mighty. Instead, he strutted into the village square where young women giggled around him, pouring him palm wine as he boasted loudly. "You will see today," he declared, chest puffed. "This tournament is already mine. Why train for a battle you have already won?" His men laughed. The women applauded him. And Bariga, satisfied with their worship, continued enjoying himself. Meanwhile, Tarek was in the training ground behind the king's palace alone. Tarek's discipline. The giant stranger moved with the focus of a man whose soul was tied to every strike. Sweat poured down his back as he practiced again and again, each motion precise, each breath controlled. He fought imaginary opponents, countering unseen blows, leaping, turning, striking. Children watched him in silence, wide-eyed. Even the elders who passed by nodded approvingly, whispering, "He trains like Oduro once did. He takes nothing for granted. May the ancestors favor him." But Tarek trained not for applause, not for fame, not even for reward. He trained because discipline was his life. He sharpened his spirit the way a blacksmith sharpened a blade. The day of reckoning arrives. By noon, villagers flooded the enormous arena built between 4 great Ururoko trees. Flags of every neighboring village flapped in the wind. Chiefs and kings from distant lands sat in decorated chairs. Drummers beat so fiercely that even the earth seemed to vibrate. The announcer's voice echoed, "Let the great tournament begin." Warriors from different villages clashed in fierce battles, wrestling matches, spear duels, and tests of brute strength. Some of Ururoko's fighters won small victories. Many lost early. The weight of expectation began to fall heavily on Uroroko's shoulders. Everyone knew the truth. Their real hope rested only on two men, Bariga Oduro and the stranger named Tarek. The pressure builds. As fighters fell one after the other, the villagers grew restless. What if we lose? What if other villages mock us? Oduro's name cannot be buried with defeat. Eyes turned to Bariga, who smirked confidently, and to Tarek, who stood quietly, eyes steady, unfazed by the chaos around him. The announcer called out, "Next, the Battle of Bariga Oduro." The crowd roared, filling the air with desperate hope. Bariga stretched his arms slowly, as if the match bored him. Tarek, standing far behind, watched with silent eyes. The tournament had begun. He stepped into the ring, towering above the sand, broad as a tree, fearless as thunder. His opponent entered, a fierce warrior from the mountain tribe of Kaguru. Smaller, leaner, but with sharp eyes and a stance that warned of danger. The crowd leaned forward. The drums stopped. The air froze. The battle began. Bariga charged first, heavy and confident. His fist crashed into his opponent's shield like a falling boulder. The mountain warrior slid back, impressed but unshaken. Bariga attacked again, faster, stronger, louder. The crowd cheered wildly. "Yes, that is Oduro's son," they shouted. But the Kaguru fighter waited. Studied. Measured. Bariga's hits were powerful, but sloppy, driven by pride, not skill. Then it happened. In a sudden blur, the Kaguru warrior stepped aside, gripped Bariga's wrist, twisted his elbow, and swept one leg beneath him. Bariga, the giant, the terror of Ururoko, hit the ground with a thunderous thud. The arena went silent. For the first time in his life, Bariga looked confused, afraid, human. He scrambled up, charged again, roaring. This time, the opponent moved even faster. A sharp blow, a twist, a kick to the chest. Bariga fell flat again. The referee's staff struck the ground. Bariga Oduro, defeated. A wave of disbelief swept through the arena. Children stopped chewing their roasted cassava. Women clasped their hands over their mouths. Men exchanged helpless glances. Elders closed their eyes as if a prophecy had been fulfilled. For the first time since Oduro's death, Ururoko tasted the bitter reality that legacy means nothing without character. Bariga sat in the sand, gasping, staring blankly at the crowd who no longer looked at him with fear, but with disappointment. A chief whispered, "If Oduro had seen this, his heart would have broken." And though no one said it aloud, the truth weighed on every tongue. The son of Oduro had fallen, not because he lacked strength, but because he lacked wisdom. Far in the back, leaning silently against a wooden post, Tarek watched the defeated giant. His face held no triumph, no pride, only the quiet understanding of a warrior who knew where arrogance led. The drums did not play. The wind did not move. The entire arena mourned the fall of a name once great. And so, the legacy of Oduro trembled, while the shadow of Tarek quietly began to rise. The arena that afternoon felt like a wounded lion, breathing, waiting, yet silent with disbelief. Bariga Oduro, the son of the mighty Oduro, had fallen. His defeat hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished flame. The villagers of Ururoko, who had once roared his name with pride, now sat in shock. Mothers pressed their hands over their mouths. Elders exchanged troubled glances. And the king himself, King Amenka, lowered his gaze with a heaviness not seen in years. Now, only one fighter remained to carry the name of Ururoko forward. Tarek, the stranger. When the announcer called his name, people did not rise. They did not chant. They did not clap. How could they? Their spirit had been broken by the fall of the one they believed invincible. Tarek stepped onto the fighting grounds as calmly as a man stepping into the morning sun. His feet moved with purpose, his eyes focused, his breath slow and controlled. There was no boasting in him, no flaring ego, no hunger for applause. Only duty. His opponent, a massive fighter from Odonk village, towered over most men. Muscular, fierce, celebrated. The crowd expected a brutal, drawn-out battle, one that would likely end in Uroroko's complete humiliation. But Tarek did not fear him. The gong sounded. The fight began like lightning striking dry earth. Fast, loud, unexpected. The Odonk warrior charged, swinging with a force meant to break bone. Tarek dodged like a drifting shadow, effortless and smooth. He moved with the grace of a man shaped by discipline, not pride. The villagers leaned forward despite themselves. Their silence shifted into curiosity. Another swing, another dodge. Then, Tarek struck. One clean blow. Precise. Powerful. Measured. The Odonk warrior stumbled. A second strike sent him to the ground. A final hold pinned him with no chance of escape. The referee raised Tarek's hand. Victory. The arena exploded. Not slowly, not cautiously, but all at once, like a dam bursting after holding too much water. Cheers erupted. Drums beat. Women ululated. Elders rose to their feet with trembling joy. Ururoko was saved. King Amenka stood, his face beaming with relief and pride. I, Amenka of Ururoko, he declared, honor Tarek, son of no known man, but heart of 1,000 warriors. He has restored our dignity. Tarek bowed deeply, not to show off, but in respect to the people and the land that had given him refuge. Meanwhile, Bariga watched the celebration with a storm raging behind his eyes. Where the crowd had once screamed his name, they now lifted another man high. Where he once inspired awe, he now inspired whispers. Maybe Bariga was never as strong as his father. Tarek fights like Oduro himself, humble, disciplined. Bariga relies on fear, but fear can't win a tournament. The words spread like harmattan dust. Painful, sharp, impossible to escape. Bariga clenched his fists, jaw tight, heart boiling with humiliation. But the village of Ururoko had chosen. Their hero, their champion, their new face of pride, was Tarek. And from that day, the shadow of comparison began to grow between the two giants, one rising, the other falling. The air in the village was thick with anticipation. The New Year festival had arrived, bringing with it the smell of roasted meats, the vibrant colors of banners, and the rhythmic beating of drums echoing through the hills. Yet, amid the celebrations, a murmur ran through the crowd, one that quickly swelled into a roar. Villagers gathered in the central square, voices rising in unison, demanding a match. Their eyes gleamed with excitement and curiosity. Let them fight. Bariga and Tarek, they chanted, stamping their feet on the ground. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Such a demand was unprecedented. King Amenka, seated on his ornate throne, felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him. He cleared his throat, trying to maintain authority, but the clamor of the crowd was relentless. Reluctantly, he nodded, his face a mask of hesitation. Very well, he announced. A match shall be held. Let it honor the festival and the courage of our champions. Word spread like wildfire. By evening, the entire village buzzed with excitement. Bariga and Tarek prepared in their separate quarters, their minds sharpened with focus. Bariga's hands flexed around the hilt of his blade, muscles tense, eyes steely. Tarek's movements were precise, his body a coiled spring ready to strike. Neither spoke, each lost in thought, knowing the eyes of the entire village would be upon them at sunrise. But the night before the match, while the village slept under the blanket of darkness, Bariga moved silently. With him were Jomo and Care, his most trusted allies. No one knew where they went, no one would. Their mission was deadly, shrouded in secrecy. Bariga's heart pounded, not with fear, but with determination. The stakes of the New Year festival could wait. There were matters more urgent, more dangerous, that demanded his courage tonight. As the moon cast a silver light over the village, the trio slipped through the quiet streets and vanished into the forest. Hours later they came back home and went to bed. By morning, The first light of dawn painted the village in pale gold, illuminating streets still heavy with the scent of festival fires. Villagers gathered in the central square, voices lively with chatter and expectation, eager for the spectacle they had demanded. Children perched on trees, elders leaned on staffs, and merchants abandoned their stalls. All eyes turned to the grand arena, waiting for the champions to appear. But when the appointed hour arrived, Bariga was seen the stage, but Tarek was nowhere to be seen. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Where is he?" someone asked. "Did he flee?" another muttered. A group of villagers hurried to Tarek's house. The wooden door creaked open, revealing a scene that chilled them. The house was deserted. The hearth was cold, the weapons untouched, and on the table lay a single piece of parchment, the ink dark and deliberate. "Tarek has left the village. Forgive me, but I must walk my own path." Shock rippled through the crowd. Some felt betrayal, others suspicion. Had Tarek abandoned them in fear? Or was there a darker reason behind his sudden departure? The festival's excitement drained, replaced by uneasy murmurs and pointed glances. Meanwhile, word spread quickly through the village. Tarek would not be fighting. The people's disappointment turned to fear as all eyes fell on Bariga. Whispers shifted. This was no longer a contest of skill or honor. This was a demonstration of power. Bariga himself made no proclamation. He walked through the square, his shadow stretching long across the cobblestones. The villagers parted instinctively, a mix of awe and unease in their gaze. Every confident step he took reminded them of the stories, of his victories, his cunning, and his unpredictability. With Tarek gone, no one dared challenge him, and Bariga's dominance became unquestionable. Yet even as the village murmured his name with fear, the festival carried on, but the air was different now, tense, expectant, and tinged with uncertainty. Bariga had regained the crown of dominance, but it was a hollow victory. A week had passed since the festival, and the village still buzzed with uneasy whispers. Bariga's dominance remained unchallenged, but the shadows that had followed him into the arena seemed to have seeped into every corner of the settlement. It was mid-morning when a contingent of warriors from a neighboring town arrived, their horses kicking up clouds of dust as they thundered into the village square. Behind them, a frail figure was shackled and supported by 2 guards. The villagers recoiled at the sight, murmuring in curiosity and fear. King Amenka rose from his throne, his expression tight with concern. "What brings you to my village unannounced?" he demanded, his voice firm but wary. The leader of the visiting warriors stepped forward. His eyes were sharp, and his tone carried the weight of urgency. "Your Majesty, we bring a matter of grave importance." This man, he gestured toward the prisoner, was caught in the forest, performing acts most foul. The prisoner's body shivered under the heat of the sun, his face pale and drawn. His voice, when he tried to speak, was a raspy whisper. He was too weak to stand unassisted, let alone speak freely. After a moment of silence, the visiting warriors explained. Under duress, the prisoner had confessed that he had buried the body of a stranger, a warrior from an unknown place, deep within the forest. They added that he had been paid by someone from Ururoko, though he could not reveal the mastermind's identity. The villagers gasped. A body hidden in the forest, a paid killer, a nameless enemy from a distant land. It was a story that unsettled every mind in the square. King Amenka frowned deeply, exchanging a glance with his counselors. "If the culprit is hidden among us," he said slowly, "then the people must know. But the prisoner cannot speak before the crowd. He is too weak." The visiting leader nodded. "Sire, we suggest an open confession. Announce what he has admitted in private to the people. Let the truth be known. Whoever hired him will reveal themselves, either in fear or in arrogance." A heavy silence fell over the square. The suggestion was bold, risky even. To announce a secret act of violence publicly might provoke anger, vengeance, or panic. Yet it was the only way, the warriors insisted, to draw out the hidden hand behind the crime. The king's voice finally broke the stillness. "Prepare the square," he commanded. "We will summon the people." Let the prisoner's confession, though silent, be made known. As preparations began, Bariga watched from the shadows of the square. His heart thumped, not with fear for himself, but with the uneasy knowledge that the forest still held secrets that could undo the fragile dominance he had regained. And somewhere, in the unseen edges of the village or beyond, the person who had orchestrated this violence waited, confident that no one would ever uncover the truth. The village was tense as night fell. King Amenka had announced that the prisoner's public confession would be made the next morning. Everyone wondered who had sent the stranger to kill the unknown warrior, and the villagers waited with both fear and curiosity. But that night, danger struck. As the prisoner was being escorted to a new cell by the guards, a group of masked attackers ambushed them. Steel clashed in the darkness, shouts filled the air, and chaos erupted. The guards fought bravely, but the attackers were determined. In the confusion, the prisoner was killed. The attackers tried to escape, but the guards, though shaken, managed to capture them before they could vanish into the night. When the king ordered them unmasked, everyone gasped. The attackers were none other than Bariga's own men, Jomo and Care. Their faces, once familiar and trusted, were now twisted with failure and fear. King Amenka's eyes narrowed. "So, you were behind this?" he said, his voice sharp. "Trying to stop the confession, killed the prisoner, and hiding the truth. You will answer for your actions." Jomo and Care were thrown into prison, chained and watched closely. They would remain there until morning, when the king planned to make the prisoner's confession public. The first rays of the sun bathed the village in a soft, golden light. The villagers gathered in the square, their murmurs carrying a mix of curiosity, fear, and anticipation. Today, the truth would finally be revealed. King Amenka sat tall on his throne, flanked by his guards and the visiting warriors. In front of him, the captured assassins, Jomo and Care, stood chained, their faces pale and defiant. "My people," the king began, his voice steady, "these men attempted to prevent the truth from being known. They killed the prisoner, who could tell us what really happened in the forest." The villagers leaned in, eager for answers. The king gestured to Jomo and Care. "Tell us who sent you." The two men shook their heads. "We acted on our own," they said in unison, their voices strained. People murmur, "Are they not Bariga's men?" The king called out Bariga. Bariga himself stepped forward, trying to appear calm. "I swear, I had no part in any of this," he declared. "I am innocent." The crowd buzzed with doubt and suspicion. Whispers spread quickly, some unsure who to believe. Then, the visiting warriors approached the king, carrying someone wrapped in a blanket. They placed him on a stretcher at the center of the square. The villagers gasped as the blanket was lifted. There, pale and weak, but very much alive, was the stranger, the missing warrior. "Tarek," someone whispered, barely daring to speak his name. Tarek's voice was hoarse but clear. "I am alive because of the neighborhood warriors," he said, struggling to stand. "Bariga and his men ambushed us in the forest. They tried to kill us and send my body to be buried there. But I survived, and now I have come to tell the truth." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to Bariga. His face, once proud, now drained of color. The whispers of fear became murmurs of anger and disbelief. King Amenka's gaze was sharp. "Bariga," he said, rising to his full height, "you are guilty of murder and treason. You betrayed your people and sought to hide your crimes. You will face justice." Bariga was seized by the guards, his protests drowned out by the cries of the villagers. He was brought before the king's court, tried, and sentenced to death for his crimes. With Bariga's arrest, a sense of relief washed over the village. The shadow that had hung over them for weeks lifted, and peace returned. The villagers cheered softly, not for the punishment, but for the truth finally being revealed and justice served. Tarek, though weak, was tended to and honored for his bravery. The festival of the New Year, once marked by fear and chaos, ended with a quiet celebration of courage, truth, and the return of peace to the village. With Bariga gone, the village slowly healed from the fear and betrayal that had shadowed it. The people looked to Tarek, who had returned from near death to reveal the truth and restore justice. Tarek did not boast. He trained, guided, and protected the village with humility, showing that true strength came not from power or fear, but from courage, wisdom, and honor. Slowly, he became the village's champion, admired not only for his skill in battle but for the integrity of his heart. Stories of his bravery spread far and wide, and villagers spoke of him with the same reverence once reserved for Oduro the Mighty. Children grew up listening to tales of Tarek's deeds, learning that strength without character is dangerous and hollow. Generations would remember the lesson of Bariga and Tarek. Strength without character is a blade that cuts its owner first. And so, the village of Ururoko thrived in peace, guided by the courage of a true giant, one who had risen not through fear, but through honor, humility, and the bravery to face the darkest of deeds.